All right, so in the previous movie, we made all of our keyframes. Now we want to make the in-between frames that will allow us to move objects in the animation in a smoother, more gradual manner. So I'm going to get out of the browser here and go back to Photoshop, and you'll see that this file is right where we left off. So the beginning of your animation doesn't really need tweens or transitions. They just kind of come on rather abruptly, and that's the way I want it, until all of them are on the screen, and then the more gradual, slower motion occurs. And so if I look at frame 7, and then look at frame 8, basically that second black column is going to move gradually from this position to this position. Now what's nice about Tweens is that Photoshop does the work for you. You tell it where you want the tween to start, where you want it to end, how many steps you'd like it to take, in other words, how many frames you want Photoshop to create, and then Photoshop will do the rest for you. So I'm going to click on frame 7 because that's my starting point, then hold the Shift key and click on frame 8. And now I need to go to one of two places. I can either go to the menu over here and drop that, or I think this is a little bit easier. There is a button right here specifically for this. So I'm just going to click on that button, and that will bring up this window here. So basically it's saying tween with selection, so that's why I had you click on frame 7 and 8. And then I would like the transition to occur across all of these different specific parameters. So that's fine the way it is. That's a default. I just leave it. And then here's the important part. How many frames would you like to add? So obviously the fewer the frames you add, the more jerky the motion is going to be. The more frames you add, the smoother it's going to be. Now, there are limitations with this. You don't want to get into adding too many frames in between. It will just slow things down too much. So I've discovered for something like this that around 10 frames looks pretty good.
Yes, dear.
You may want to go up to 20, but I'm going to do 10 for this particular demo. So I'm just going to type 10 in there. And then my work here is done. It's time for Photoshop to take over. I'll click on OK. And you'll see that it will add the frames between that frame 7 and then what used to be frame 8. And so if I click through this, you'll see that now that column is moving over in much smaller, shorter increments. So I could have done this on my own. I didn't have to create tweens. I could have added all these frames and then pulled it into small increments and move it across. But why would I want to do that? That's nuts. So now the one problem is that when it made those new duplicate frames, you'll notice it made the duration of these frames be 2 seconds, which was the same duration as frame 7. So I want to fix that. I want to mark frame 8 and then mark frame 17, which is 10 frames, and change that to be 0.1 second. Okay, so that way that movement, those little steps, will occur much more quickly. So let me click on frame 7 then, and let's just preview this. Once again, through the magic of editing, I went ahead and finished up a couple of the other tweens. Now I would like to create the ending for this GIF animation. So if you remember from when we watched it in the browser at the beginning, these columns of dots will now spread back to their original position and then turn off one by one until you have a blank white screen, and then it's ready to go back to the beginning and start the loop over again. So I wanted to show you kind of a nice simple trick for reusing frames you've already created. So I'm going to scroll over here in my timeline window, and I want to copy the first 7 frames. So frame 1 is the blank frame, and then frame 7 is when all of the columns of dots have been turned on. So I don't just do a regular old copy and paste. I have to go access a menu. So I'm going to go over here to the menu for the timeline window, open that up, and sadly it's going to get cut off again, but I think you can barely see right here in the lower right corner, copy frames. So I'm going to select that, and then I'm going to scroll over here to the end of the timeline window. Click on the last frame, and then I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to open the menu and choose Paste Frames. And then it will give me the option of where I would like to paste those. And so what I want to do is I want to paste these after the selection. So frame 40 is selected, so if I paste after the selection, it will make it be 41, 42, 43, etc. So I'm going to click OK, and here we go. All right, so that's good. Only one problem is these frames are kind of in the reverse order that I want. I really want it to go to this frame next, from there to there, and then I want things to gradually disappear. So they're in exactly the reverse order. How can I fix that?
I don't know.
Well, I'm going to go to that same menu. I need to mark all of those frames, all 7 frames. Go to the same menu, and sadly you can't see this, but about halfway down the menu is something called Reverse Frames. So I'm going to choose that, and you'll notice that now these frames have indeed been reversed. Okay, so my work here is done. Kind of the last thing I need to do is to create the tween between frame 40 and frame 41. And so again, I've magically edited out some of the work I've done, and I went ahead and finished up this movie. Now what I'd like to show you how to do is to save this as an animated GIF. Because even though I keep calling this an animated GIF, it really isn't yet. It's just a Photoshop file. So I need to get this into a form that a browser can actually understand it and display it. And so saving the animated GIF is the same process as saving an image. So you just go to the File menu, pull down to Save for Web, and then this is very important. You must make sure that you specify the format as GIF. JPEG, PNG will not work. It doesn't understand multiple frames. GIF does, so as long as you choose GIF, Photoshop will automatically understand that you want to export the frames with all of those animation settings. So I want to change my view here. I'm just going to switch to Optimize, so we're only seeing this once. And I wanted to point out that down here, you can actually play this in the Save for Web window. So this is very handy because one of the more important things you're going to do is determine how many colors you want to use to render this animation. The fewer colors you use, the less memory it will take. So 256 colors are possible, but I don't want to do that because that will pump up the memory about twice as high as it is now. 32, through various trial and error, I've discovered that 32 for this particular animation looks very good. It looks pretty much as good as the original, but uses much fewer colors. And so that's good. I'm going to go ahead and set it for that. And then these settings here you might want to just copy pretty much almost any time you save a GIF for the web. Selective color, no dither, meaning it doesn't give you those little dots when it tries to render something that's full tone, and then same thing down here. Transparency, it really depends on the image whether you want that checked or not. I'm going to leave it checked because I've discovered it actually takes a couple of K less memory when it's checked. So even though there's no transparency in the file, it saves a little bit of memory, so why not?
Totally, for sure.
So that's it. Once you've got your setting the way you want it, you can just click on the Save button down here. And then your interface is very similar to what you've seen already. So what I want to do is go to the desktop, navigate to the site, go to my in-class folder, go to week 3, find the images folder, and that's where you want this to go. Make sure your extension is correct, format is images only, click on Save. And that's it. You have created your animated GIF. And so now the last thing to do is to just check it, make sure it works. And a very simple way to do that is just to open it up in a browser.